This episode is sponsored by Supreme of the UK. Click the link in the description and support the podcast. Quote CFR at the checkout and receive 10% discount on your order.
The angel Michael is now incarnated into them.
Yeah.
And, people did go out there and start doing that. Yeah, during that time. Yes, you definitely had that.
So it was one of those crazy splits that someone's trying to gain control.
Yeah,
I mean,
you did.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
even had some that were, yeah, even during the time when he was up, people would say, will come to class and say they were Jesus.
I mean, listen,
Crazy.
he's a charisma as most of these people are. They're charismatic. He could recite information very quickly, say things with very
Hmm.
matter of fact and all that. Um,
Hmm.
it, there's some things like the Ritz stuff, the pickle down man, whatever. There's some stuff was just like, why are we
Some
even
stuff.
going there?
I just say majority of the stuff. Have you ever had? I've read every book he's ever put out.
Well, remember where I am. So we had very. I only found out about York in outside of, as you say, the hip hop element of it, and seeing and hearing the odd phrase and seeing some of the garb, etc. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't hear any true light tapes or anything until 2000, the late. I don't know, when would I say, 2010 maybe?
Hmm.
And then I started to hear about, oh, this, Dr. York, he got locked up for 135 years and it was all wrong, and he's innocent and all this. So I'm looking
Hmm.
down this rabbit
Hmm.
hole and I'm thinking, who is this guy? I've never even heard of him before. And then, obviously
Yeah.
the defense was, oh, look at what he was trying to do. He was trying to uplift black people and show them
Oh
and
boy.
their identity, etc. And at
Hmm.
this point, I'm
Hmm.
thinking, does this add up? Was he really indeed trying to sort of create an alternative life and, show black people and give them a better opportunity, etc.? So I was, quote unquote, drinking a Kool-Aid, thinking, okay, well, they do set people up if they're trying to do things right. And then eventually I'm hearing these victims coming forth outside of the Montel Williams thing, because a lot of them recanted and then changed statements. It's just been
Hold it. Nope. I want to, because that's one of the current talking points. There were no recantments,
okay.
none, unless you're saying that these people had a change of mind after York was incarcerated, because all of the individuals who were part of his defense, all of them have since admitted that they either lied at the trial or that they admit that he did in fact molest them. The closest that you came to a recantment was Habiba Washington, where there was a video that she did for the Nuwaubians, not to be put on YouTube, but she thought, I guess she was doing it for them, because she said that she felt sorry for him that he got 135 years, which is essentially a death sentence.
Hmm.
So she did this video on behalf of the organization, and they took that and then ran with it. And because it went on YouTube, York's attorneys had got hold of it, and they put in motions to, one, have York acquitted, and second, and they wanted to have a new trial. And the video was done in April of 2004, and York's attorneys brought her into court in August of 2004 to speak about the video, because it was a hearing on whether or not York is going to be able to be granted a new trial. And at that hearing, and I put it up on my website, the entire discussion, of that, because it was really short. And York's attorney, Jonathan Marr, got up there and he questioned her about it. And she made the point clear that she lied about the video. She lied about this, and it was why she felt sorry for him. And they never prosecuted her for it, perjury or anything like that. because it was already established that this child at the time when she was in the organization, she loved him. She had this thing for him. And the molestation began at age 13 with fondling, anal, oral. And, it was pretty understood that this is typical victims when it came to a charismatic person who was the dominant force in their life. I'm sorry, Habiba's father definitely wasn't. Even though he was a part of the organization, he didn't spend any time with her because he was always out propagating or working. And she was not with her mother. In fact, when she was taken into upstate New York with another small group of girls, the parents weren't around. And then anything that was said about the parents was that she was either a bum or they were either bums and they didn't care about you. So York had complete, total control of raising these girls,
Mm-hmm. To groom and
especially in upstate New York.
manipulate.
Absolutely manipulated. And this thing pretty much, at least in her case, began in Brooklyn. And it wasn't like people didn't notice it because she even made the point that at the trial that her stepmother noticed that she was coming out of his office or out of his unit at all hours of the night, and would ask the question, "Why are you coming out of his place?" Well, nothing's going on. We're just having fun, and blah 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 blah, that kind of thing. So it was already known, but it wasn't until 1998 that Pauline Rogers put out a letter that she wrote to the sheriff and I think the Atlanta Journal Constitution, speaking about children that she saw leaving his trailer and children in his care winding up pregnant. And she thought that there should be some type of investigation as to why this is occurring. And that was the launch pad for the investigation into the organization and the allegations of uh, child molestation.
So the structure was that kind of circular or hierarchical that literally there was that few people who knew what was going on.
Absolutely. Because there was this inner circle. And because they were in York's inner circle, nobody's going to get inside that circle. And these people that were chosen, they were always selected. In fact, because I was just going over one of the documents this morning because I just put another article up on my website. Um, these processes began by way of grooming by other adults. So Habiba Washington at age 13 was groomed by one of York's concubines, or what they call wives, one of his concubines. Um, it was about three of them. And she had made the point that they showed her pictures of his penis. And the whole point was to teach them how to please a
That's
man. In
disgusting.
this case, it was going to be York because in upstate New York, because they're going to be leaving Brooklyn and they're going to be moving in Monticello, New York, in the Catskills, and only a select group will have the honors to please him. Take care. I'm sorry. The term was take care of him,
Now,
and that was just a small group.
is this based upon the ideology that he's more than a flesh and being man?
That came in. I mean, it was always a part of the ideology, but it wasn't until the 90s that he really took it to the outer limits. Because initially, he just claimed to be an just I haven't used that word so many years. He always claimed to be an avatar, and different beings would incarnate in
Oh
him.
gosh, oh my gosh.
And in this case, he was the angel Michael or Melchizedek, because he always equated Michael and Melchizedek as being one and the same. So he says that the person that you see or you read about in the book of Revelation that's giving John the revelation, that's him. Because that's Melchizedek, because in that passage is John says, I turned to the one who showed me these things, and it was one like until the Son of Man. Not saying that he was the Son of Man, because the implication in saying you're the Son of Man is saying that you're Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But York was smart enough to know that you don't want to go out there and say you're Jesus, because then nobody's going to take you serious. So he said he was the angel, the one who was sent here to prepare the way for the return of the real Messiah.
So
Okay.
how did they connect Melchizedek to Michael? Where's the connection? Because Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, yeah?
Hmm. Yeah, because yeah, he was the one who was mentioned in the book of Genesis, going all the way back,
Yeah.
and you'll find him mentioned in the books of Malachi
Hmm.
as well as in the book of Revelation. Because you would think that is based on just the M
Yeah.
in the pronunciation, the letter,
Hmm.
or mem in Hebrew, or meme in Arabic. Because he even also said that he was the grandson of Anu, um, um, Marduk. He would say Murdoch, but Marduk. He was claiming to be Marduk around the 1995, 96. So you had Marduk, Umar Utu, Melchizedek, Michael M. Yeah. And yeah, and at that time he started pushing the doctrine as he and I remember it well, because I wasn't, it didn't set well to me, because the audio will come out. The master teacher is now telling us who he really is, an extraterrestrial being from the eighth planet in the 19th galaxy called
Yeah.
Ilion. He's a man from the planet Risk. So that publication, Man from Planet Risk, is where things really went nuts. So by he
Mm.
claiming to be an Anunnaki and being the son of Enki,
Not a little, but Enki.
not Enlil, Enki specifically. And of course, he as you know, I eventually pulled away from him. I began to enroll in classes of studying ancient Sumerian language. So, in fact, I had to miss a class today because I wanted to do this. But
Honors.
when I a lot of the articles that I did on my website in the section "Right Knowledge Gone Wrong," I put a heavy emphasis on Mesopotamian literature and history, and I proved without a shadow of a doubt that York didn't know what he was talking about when it came to that topic. In fact, I even spoke with some of the people who put those books together, and they made it clear that a lot of that stuff they just grabbed off the internet.
Yeah, cut and
If
pasted.
there was one publication, because some of the publications began to shift, instead of them being big books, they eventually became that again. But they usually started off as little $5 books, because we had removed the name Nubian Hebrews and moved it to Holy Tabernacle Ministries, or
Mm.
HTM. And as it metamorphosized, as he pulled away from quote Sumer studies under Zechariah Sitchin, because that's all he was using, Zechariah Sitchin's publications. The Earth Chronicles series under Zechariah Sitchin. That was the basis of most of the books and the audios that were coming out from 1990 to about 1997.
But
And then he
Stitching
started
himself,
moving into the whole Egyptian thing.
Stitching himself isn't the best qualified to be leaning your information on it anyway.
No, Sitchin was definitely not.
He's not even qualified, right?
Yeah, my friend of mine at the time, Michael Heiser, had put a website together, and it was called SitchinIsWrong.com, where he pretty much exposed Sitchin as a fraud.
Mm,
And I contacted Michael and kind of shared with him what I did, what I was a part of, and I was just trying to get some pointers on him as to how to go about putting up a website, because I didn't want to. I wanted something similar to his, but I didn't want it to come off like his, you
hmm.
know. And he gave me some insight in it, and that's what culminated into Nuwaubianism.com. So the late Michael Heiser, he was the one who was instrumental in helping to establish my website.
Excellent. Created a good platform. I mean, at its height, like what kind of numbers could we sort of associate with this group?
What do you mean?
Like people wise, what kind of fellowship should we say? Because it was far reaching than just like America. Because there's like in Jamaica there was a big presence,
Okay.
right?
Let me say this because I think that the implication is that he was that popular. No, how this is how we were structured. Again, when you become a part of the organization, all right, you are asked to go out and propagate. Now, individuals who had stores, they may have come into this information. Say, I give you an example. In England, you had for years, you've been going all the way back to the 80s. You had a store in England. I don't remember where, but you had one there. So you had the organization there, and then of course York had established Trinidad and Tobago had an Ansar movement there. I think in Jamaica they had them, but they weren't under him in terms of his establishment. These would be
Okay.
supporters,
Okay.
satellites. So he was
Mm,
trying to get him to open up in other countries where you had a substantial black population.
right.
But as far as he being so wide reaching as all eyes shall behold him, as he liked to say, you what that noise? You didn't he wasn't as popular as the propaganda would be
Make it.
put
Mm,
out because the whole implication again was that he was so great and he was so well known worldwide is why they had to take him down. And that just wasn't the case. It was just the people who had bookstores or supported us, they would go out and try to spread his doctrine. And it usually centered around religious teachings, the Bible, Jesus,
hmm.
truth, because the whole Christ series was popular. Then you had the God series, which was popular. And those two series were more like coming from an atheist perspective, the God series, because like, look, the book, is God a wimp? Whose God is responsible? God misinterpreted. Those types of publications, they were coming from more of an atheistic viewpoint
Mm.
where he's just going at it, showing how God was he was a punk. He said, "I God so loved the world that that he gave his only begotten son." Well, he wouldn't come himself, that kind of thing. You see, and that
It,
appealed because when you saw those titles, you walk past a table
yeah,
that grabbed you.
of course.
One of the more popular books I had that I was selling was, well, Is God a Wimp? People say, no, he's not. And that opened up for argument. And then eventually,
Discussion.
and it was only like $5 a book.
So when you say book, we're talking about the little pamphlet things, or we're talking about like a proper book?
Yeah, they were little small pamphlets. In
Yeah,
fact,
yeah.
the early days they were called pamphlets of peace. But as he became more and more popular, a lot of those earlier pamphlets, he revised them and started releasing them in hard books, not hardback,
Okay.
but they became thick
Yeah,
books. Matter of
yeah.
fact, there was one book called Sex Life of a Muslim, Volume 1 and 2, little red thin booklet, like a magazine. And
Yes.
then around 1989, he released it, he revised it, and it was about 400 pages and it was real thick.
Mm. Yeah, I think the
So he
only
started doing that with a number. I'm sorry.
as I said, the only publication I got was the Leviathan first
Yeah,
volume.
yeah. That was another extremely popular publication. That book, I think the first edition was in 1970, and then it had been revised about every 3 or 4 years up until about 2012. Yeah, because it although it's still the foundation of it was based in theology,
Oh yeah.
Christianity. Um, but it was getting into more areas of conspiracy where more people were familiar with New World Order,
Hmm.
Illuminati,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, Council of 300, you know,
Yes.
taking the writings of Albert Churchwald, a lot of people, David Icke, and a whole bunch of other people's publications, and just rewording it, plagiarizing them
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
Just what do you call it? A mosaic plagiarism, and putting it out in that way. And it became very he made millions off of those books. He was a book hustler. So, and that was his number one. That book Leviathan, he even told us that was his number one seller of all time.
I can imagine. It it is still captivating of sorts when you want to go into those kind of realms.
Yeah.
But as you say, it did touch on so many different points. Now, one name I would add to that as well would be good old Bill Cooper as well.
Yeah, that's interesting that you even mentioned Bill Cooper because when York was talking about, he didn't, well, he wasn't mentioning William Cooper per se. He would take a character that William Cooper mentioned in his book, Behold the Pale Horse, when he
Hmm.
talked about Krill, an extraterrestrial named Krill. And York would tell us that Krill was one of the beings that used to visit him when he was a child. And in that Troll Nuwaubian website, so they put about three of his letters in the section where he put out letters to Nuwaubians. I even put it on my website where he talked about Krill and about three other extraterrestrials visited him at Jones County Jail. While before this is before the trial, and that he was going to be all right. And then I think it's another one that's after the trial where it talks about Krill and Al-Saad. They cured him of his hereditary angioedema, and
Okay.
that he was able to levitate out of his cell in the presence of other inmates. And
Hmm.
this was on video. And the ship that brought them in was outside on the yard.
Outside of the old Supermaxes waiting for you to get in.
No, this is before he got there. This is before he had some infractions where he threatened staff and their families that he was eventually relocated to the Colorado Supermax. Because initially, after he was sentenced in May, he was sentenced to 135 years in Leavenworth, Kansas, in a less secure. It wasn't a maximum. I mean, it was a maximum security prison, but it wasn't anything as drastic as where he is now.
Um,
Because you got to remember there was in the case in the state he when he pled guilty also to witness tampering, and a lot of the Nuwaubian cult members are going around harassing
yeah.
the sheriffs, the judge's family. They were doing a whole bunch of little mischievous things, and that's part of probably why he got the maximum as far as the judge was concerned, because of some of the dirty deals that the members were doing to people,
So they made
putting their
the
family
right.
information out,
Yeah.
saying they're part of a network and they are this and they are that, all to appeal to the emotion of the people.
Yeah.
And when sentencing came, after he was found guilty on 11 of 13, he threw the book at him.
Is there because there's actually isn't there the not DNA? There's isn't there something to the link is the herpes? There's some kind of herpes link to the victims and himself?
He said hairpiece?
No, herpes. That's STD.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, here's the thing. The herpes issue didn't come up at the trial. The herpes thing is what led up to the guilty plea in both the federal and the state, because initially York pled not guilty, and his wife, oh, I'm sorry, his girlfriend, his main wife is what they used to call her, but he wasn't married to her. Kathy Johnson and three Kathy Johnson, Khadijah Merritt, Astir Cole, and Chandra Lampkin. All of them were already at home watching him plead guilty because, well, at least Kathy made bail. And in 2000, in January 23 and 24, 2004, um, he pled guilty in both the state and the federal on, well, in the federal, it was, I think it was 4 counts of transporting minors across state lines for the purpose of illegal sexual activity and money structuring. The state, it was 208 counts, but it was reduced down to 77. And the video that you may see on YouTube of he pleading guilty was January 24 in the state. And he's in his guilty plea. It tells you have been charged with child molestation because that statute in the state is child molestation. That's what he pled guilty to, and has never withdrawn that guilty plea. He went to court. It went to trial because the judge in the case, Ashley Royal. No, it wasn't Ashley Royal. It was can't remember the other judge, but he rejected York's guilty plea on the grounds that the severity of the crimes, just 15 years was too light a sentence for that that type of crime that was going on, perpetrated against children, as well as the federal issue. So he rejected it, and he wanted York to withdraw it. And York did not withdraw it. His attorneys had put up a motion to have it withdrawn. And by that taking place, then the government went forward in a superseding indictment, which they had, and they had to prove their case, in which they did, on those superseding charges. And that is what led up to the 13. He was acquitted on 8 and I think 8 and 12. One was the trip to Disney World, because anytime you transport a minor um, across state lines with the intent to have sexual activities with her or he or them, um, then that becomes a federal crime. And because that statute, the Mann Act, was updated, it went beyond just pimps, or a charge going after pimps who would transport girls across the country, one city to another state, and to have Johns, conduct their business and profit from it. So to elevate it to where people who were exploiting children or molesting children by taking them out of the state, that was what he was charged under the Federal Mann Act. And that had, I think it was just the maximum on that was 180 months. And in that count 8, it was insufficient evidence of that. And it wasn't just that he had to travel from one state to another by himself, meaning he had those individuals in the vehicle with him. No, the way they updated it in 1976, 1982, I think it was. If you even caused for someone to be transported by way of communication, electronic, verbal, notes, letters, anything like that, that all that was put under that banner. And because of the testimony in the trial, the questioning from the assistant district attorney was asking the questions about that. Did you accompany York when you came down? No, it was my mother. It was so and so. And but it was brought out that Kathy Johnson had a list of names of individuals who were to be chosen to come down from upstate New York, as well as Habiba Washington. So on York's recommendations, he decided on who was going to come down, and that it put him in that that range of
Mm.
conviction because he caused for them to come down. And when they went down, each person that testified made the point that the sex did increase when they went down to Georgia. So the intent to have sexual activities with minors, it was proven because that intent became a pattern.
Now, this wasn't just pardon self. This wasn't just isolated to girls, was it?
No, it wasn't. And that was another part of the well, if you had a chance to read the federal indictment, I should have sent it to you. Um, it gives you a list of the individuals by name, or at least in the indictment, it has them initials, their initials,
Hmm.
and the case was centered around activities that took place in upstate New York in 1993, 1992, and that involved males as well. And there were other individuals who he molested that they weren't part of um, the case that have since spoken out about it. But yes, Tarek Noel was the one
Oh,
individual,
yeah, that's
which
who I was
that
thinking.
molestation began at, yeah, that began at age 7 in his case. And he wasn't the only one. Asa Johnson was another individual. Um, uh, there was another one, K.E. I'm not going to mention his name because he
Hmm.
asked me not to over the years, and a few others. And that, see, it wasn't just because, just as the lead prosecutor was indicating to the judge, and I put this on my website, she made the point that this is not just a typical child molestation case, because it wasn't just a thing as where his word against their word. You had to have corroborating evidence. You had
Hmm.
witnesses who participated in the sex acts with York, because York always made certain to incriminate individuals before he indulged in the activity. So there were girls, older teens, as well as adults, because it would start off where either an older teen or an adult would perform sex acts either on the minor or York, and then they would all engage in the group sex. So most of the sexual activity were always in groups.
Now,
So they were always witnesses, but they were
you,
always fearful to speak
yeah,
out because
reprisal.
they would always be implemented or implicated in being part of that
Mm.
sexual activity, especially if they were over 18. They fear being classified as pedophiles. But even at the trial, the judge made it clear that there's no pending case against any of these adults that were molested themselves before um, they became adults. And
Adults, yeah.
then by the time York got tired of them, or they just outgrew their sexual usefulness,
Mm.
they recruited younger girls in the court, and in the cult, and it wasn't just